I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to be working on this 2012 Ford Escape. We're going to be doing the right front CV axle on it, and if you need a CV axle or any suspension parts for your car, find the TRQ brand because it's direct fit and rigorously tested. Let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is loosen the lug nuts on the wheel. We want to do that while the car is on the ground so the wheel doesn't turn while we're turning the lug nuts. This is a 19mm socket that I'm using on a 1/2-inch breaker bar, by the way. Alright, so now that the car is up in the air, we can take our 19mm and we can spin off the rest of the lug nuts. With the lug nuts off, we can take the wheel off. Alright, now we have taken the brakes off, so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see everything that we're doing, but you don't actually need to remove the brakes to get this axle out. Now we want to take off this axle nut, but it's very, very tight. So there's a few ways that you can do this. If you're in your driveway and you don't have air tools, you can use a 1/2-inch breaker bar, and you can put the socket on there, which is 32mm in this case, and you can basically pry up on it, but the problem is it's going to spin. So the way around this, there's two different methods that you can go about this. You can put something in between here, like you can put a long steel bar in between here, have a friend hold it, and then you can be on the other side cracking this loose. The other option is to put the wheel back on, set it back on the ground, and pull the center cap out of the wheel, and then you can usually fit the socket through the wheel and have the wheel hold the hub in place, and you can crack it loose. And then you can jack it all back up, take the wheel off, and then the nut will spin right off. In our case, we're going to use an air gun because it's just pretty easy to use. Just like that. If you're dealing with old rusty parts, this axle usually doesn't free itself from the hub. It's usually stuck in the hub. So there's a couple ways that you can get the hub out of, or get the axle out of the hub. One way is you put the nut back on loosely, just so it's flush with the top of this, and then you can tap it with a hammer. Don't go crazy with it because you don't want to mushroom over the end of the axle. But you can tap it with a hammer a few times, maybe shoot some rust penetrant around the edges, and hopefully the axle comes loose. There's a couple other ways you can do this too. You can also get a puller that clamps on here and pushes on the axle, and that sometimes frees it. Or if all else fails, you can basically hit this as hard as you want, mushroom over the end, and then replace the whole axle. Because if you're going to be replacing the axle anyways, it doesn't really matter if you mess up these threads. Next, we're going to remove these upper and lower strut bolts. They're both 18mm. I'm not sure if we're going to need a wrench for this side, but we'll start by taking the nuts off. Looks like the bolt's going to stay in place, so we'll just go ahead and remove these nuts. All right, it looks like these bolts are just going to push right out. But of course all these parts are new. Chances are you're not dealing with that. And if your parts are old and rusty, you can try just spraying some rust penetrant all around the bolts on each side and then turning them with a ratchet. And if you turn them with a ratchet, sometimes they'll unthread themselves out of these knuckles, or you can always just give them a little tap with a hammer, and don't go crazy because you don't want to ruin the threads, but you should be able to pop them right back out. Usually these bolts come out pretty easily. Right here is your ABS sensor. We're going to remove that from the knuckle because the wire is kind of tight, and when we release the knuckle from the strut, it's going to pull on this wire, so we don't want to have that problem. So we'll start by putting an 8mm socket on there and taking the bolt out. Once the bolt's out, the ABS sensor should pop right out of the knuckle. It may require some twisting in either direction to pop it out, but it should come out pretty easily because it doesn't have a rubber seal on it or anything that holds it in place. So there you are. Okay, so now I'm going to pull the knuckle away from the strut and push the axle through. All right, so now the axle is out of the hub, and now we just need to disconnect it on the transmission side. There's a couple ways to release the axle from the transmission. One way is to use a giant pry bar and put it up here and pry against something, but on this vehicle specifically, there's not a lot of room for a pry bar to pry against anything. So what we're going to use is a punch and a hammer. And what we'll do is we'll put a punch against the back side of the axle, and then we'll tap it with the hammer. All right, I think it has released. You can see that there's now a gap here that wasn't there before, so we should be able to pull this right out. Now we can pull this axle right out, like so. Right here on the transmission side of where the axle attaches, you'll notice that there's a little clip here. And you want to make sure that that clip stays there because this clip is what locks the axle onto this axle shaft. Inside the axle is actually a spot for that little clip to live, and it snaps into place, and you'll feel it snap as soon as you slide it on. So let's install it. All right, so now I'm gonna just kind of push it into place. It's gonna want to like snap in suddenly, so be ready for it. There we go. All right, so now you can take this part of your axle and slide it into the hub and push your hub back into place. And we can take this knuckle and hopefully slide it right back into the strut with a little wiggling. There we are. All right, now we can put the bolts back in. Probably gonna have to wiggle the strut and the knuckle around a bit. All right, there's one. Push this out of the way. All right, now we can put the nuts on, and we're gonna wanna torque these to 85 foot-pounds. All right, now we're gonna torque it to 85 foot-pounds. Okay, now we can slide the ABS sensor right back in and put the 8mm right back in the hole. Just gonna tighten this up with a 1/4 drive ratchet. Now we can put the axle nut back on, and the torque spec on this is 221 foot-pounds, which is quite a bit. So we'll get the torque wrench set up. All right, we've lowered the car back down to the ground because we want the tire on the other side to be touching the ground, because this hub and axle won't turn if the other wheel is on the ground. So now we've got our torque wrench with our 32mm socket on there, and we've set it to 221 foot-pounds. Hopefully I'm strong enough to tighten this. I think I am. There we go. Whenever you do any sort of suspension work like this, you're going to want to get an alignment afterwards because your alignment is going to be different than when you started. So now we're going to pick up the wheel and put it right back on and throw the lug nuts on. All right, there we go. You always want to start all your lug nuts by hand because you don't want to cross-thread any of them, because once you've cross-threaded the lug nuts, you have a really bad day. All right, we've got our 19mm socket and our torque wrench, so we're going to torque each one of these to 100 foot-pounds. Going to do it in a star pattern, and that way the wheels torque nice and evenly. All right, there we are.